Moses' journey is a reflection of the path walked by all those who feel they were chosen for something greater. Let's discuss what it means to hear the calling, face the challenges of a higher purpose, and persevere even when the way forward is unclear. Are you ready to discover how Moses' story can illuminate your own path and offer answers to your spiritual questions? Then stay with us until the end of this video and share in the comments. How do you perceive your calling and what challenges do you face on your journey? I'd love to hear about your experience. If this content inspires you or helps you in any way, share it with someone who could also benefit from this reflection. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Let's journey together in this spiritual quest, and leave a comment with where you're watching from so we can connect even more. Often we feel as if we're on a special mission without fully understanding what that means. It's as though we've been chosen, yet we question why and the purpose of this calling. It's common to feel out of place, as if the rules and values around us don't align with what we feel deep within, which can be both lonely and challenging. If you've ever felt this way, Moses' story might help you find some answers, or perhaps a new way to view your own journey. Today we'll explore how Moses, an ordinary man, was woven into a divine story from birth, experiencing moments of profound doubt and being guided by a force much greater than himself. His path is more than just a biblical account. It's a powerful reflection for all those who sense there is something more intended for them, who feel a greater purpose, even if not yet fully understood. Throughout this video, reflect on your own journey. What makes you feel you have a special role in the world? When have you felt called to something greater, even without fully understanding what it meant? Keep this in mind as we delve into each stage of Moses' life, for like him, many of us face uncertainties, doubts, and even inner resistance. Moses began life surrounded by danger, yet he was protected by an invisible force that seemed to guide him from birth. He was saved from certain death in a way beyond our understanding, preserved for something far greater than he could imagine. How many of us, when looking back, recognize a sort of special protection, as if something was guiding and preserving us, even in our darkest moments? And it doesn't end there. Moses grew up in an environment that wasn't truly his own, a luxurious palace filled with power and influence, yet entirely disconnected from the suffering of his people. He lived between two worlds, and at a certain point he had to choose between comfort and truth. How many times have we experienced this inner division, that feeling of living between two worlds, as if we were strangers in a place we don't fully feel is ours? This feeling is common for those who carry a special calling. And it is at this point that Moses' journey begins to reveal something essential. The path of the chosen ones is rarely easy or obvious. Often, this path requires difficult decisions and the strength to move toward what we feel is the truth. Thus, we begin to understand that from his birth, Moses was destined for something grand. Even as a baby, his life was in danger because the Pharaoh of Egypt had ordered the death of all Hebrew boys. But amidst this decree, he was protected by a mysterious force. In an act of courage and desperation, his mother placed him in a basket in the Nile River, trusting that fate would take care of him. And that's exactly what happened. The Pharaoh's daughter found Moses and, moved by compassion, decided to raise him as her own son, offering him a life of comfort and privilege in the palace. This beginning of life brings a powerful reflection. Moses was not raised among his people, but in a world of abundance and power. He lived as an Egyptian prince, but with Hebrew blood, carrying a duality that he did not fully understand. How many of us, upon feeling this calling, have experienced a similar sensation of not fully belonging to the world around us? It's as if we're being prepared for something we don't yet fully understand. It's like something greater is already present in our lives, even before we are aware of it. Moses grew up divided, with a dual identity. He was Hebrew by birth but Egyptian by upbringing. Over time, he began to perceive the pain and suffering of his people, who lived as slaves while he enjoyed the comforts of the palace. Imagine the complexity of this feeling. Knowing that his own heritage was tied to the suffering of his blood relatives, while living in luxury in a completely different reality. This internal conflict created an unease in him, an uneasiness he couldn't ignore. And this unease is very familiar to those who feel the calling of the chosen ones. A kind of awakening that comes with discomfort, the feeling that life as it is no longer makes sense. It's the moment when we realize that in order to move forward, we need to seek something beyond what's around us. This discomfort began to transform Moses. He could no longer live ignoring the pain of his people. In an impulsive act of justice, he reacted when he saw an Egyptian mistreating a Hebrew and ended up taking that man's life. This gesture changed everything. Moses was forced to flee, abandon the luxury and comfort of Egypt, and exile himself in the desert. Here comes another important parallel. How many of us, upon answering the call, end up facing mistakes or difficult decisions, with consequences that lead us to a journey of solitude and reflection? Often, the calling of the chosen ones leads us to situations where we must leave our comfort zone, step away from everything we know, and follow an uncertain and barren path, where we are forced to face our own fears and limits. Moses spent years in the desert, away from everything he knew, far from the riches of the palace and also from the suffering of his people. It was during this period that he began to transform, to understand that there was something greater in his path. The desert is a place of trial but also of transformation. It is in the desert that we begin to hear our true voice, the one that may have been muffled by the noise of daily life. Just like Moses, many of us face these deserts at some point in life. Periods of solitude and silence, where we question everything and feel that everything around us seems uncertain. However, it is in this exile, in this apparent abandonment, that the deepest transformation begins to take place. After many years in the desert, Moses was seemingly living a peaceful and simple life. He had settled, married, and begun a new life. Many of us have experienced this internal division, as if we are torn between two worlds, feeling like strangers in an environment that doesn't seem entirely our own. This feeling is common among those who sense a special calling, and it is precisely at this point that the story of Moses begins to teach us something valuable. The path of the chosen is not always clear or simple. It is often marked by complex choices and the need to remain firm in the truth we feel. Moses, after establishing a simple life as a shepherd in Midian, might have thought that his role as the chosen one was complete, that his mission was destined to be peaceful, far from everything. But, like many who have a purpose, he was surprised by an unexpected call. One day, while tending to the sheep, he came across an extraordinary sight, a bush on fire that was not consumed. Intrigued, Moses approached, and there, amid the flames, God revealed himself and called him to an unimaginable mission. He was to return to Egypt and free the Hebrew people from oppression. This encounter with the burning bush is a symbol of spiritual awakening, that moment when something greater reveals itself, calling us to a purpose that transcends our understanding. For many chosen ones, this kind of call can come in various forms, whether through an unexpected experience, a deep intuition, or a feeling that arises without warning, challenging everything we thought we knew about our own journey. Moses' reaction was one of hesitation and questioning. He felt inadequate and feared the responsibility. He questioned his own limitations, argued with God, seeking reasons to avoid the task. How could a man with communication struggles and little leadership experience free a nation? This initial doubt, this resistance, is something common among the chosen. When called to something great, many of us experience fear, insecurity, and even resistance, feeling unprepared or unworthy of such a grand task. However, God reassured Moses that he would be with him, ensuring that he would not be alone. This promise of divine presence shows that true power does not come from human abilities, but from the faith and spiritual strength that accompany us. Moses then decided to trust. Even with fear and hesitation, he accepted the call, embarking on a journey of challenges and profound transformations. This decision to move forward, even without all the answers, marks the turning point, symbolizing the courage required of each chosen one, in accepting that we are part of something greater. When Moses returned to Egypt, he was no longer the same. Transformed by his encounter with God and his decision to trust his calling, he confronted the Pharaoh, faced an empire, and led the people to freedom. However, this path was only just beginning. After finally liberating the Hebrew people, Moses took on leadership in a long journey through the desert, a crossing that would last 40 years. In this desert, he was not only a guide but also someone who, just like the people he led, was in constant transformation. After many years living in peace in the land of Midian, Moses had become a shepherd and believed his destiny was sealed in that tranquility. He may have thought his life had found stability, far from the challenges that once pursued him in Egypt. But, as often happens with those who are chosen, he was surprised by an unexpected call. One day, while watching over the sheep, Moses saw something extraordinary. A bush on fire that, despite the flames, was not consumed. It was a vision that defied logic, drawing Moses in, leading him to approach and understand what was happening. At that moment, God spoke to him, revealing himself through the fire and calling Moses to an unimaginable mission. God appointed him to return to Egypt and free the Hebrew people from slavery. This encounter with the burning bush symbolizes a spiritual awakening, the moment when a higher power reveals itself, calling us to something far beyond ordinary understanding. For many chosen ones, this call may not be a burning bush, but perhaps an unexpected event, a deep intuition, or a feeling that suddenly arises and challenges all our notions about ourselves and our purpose. However, the first reaction to such a grand call is often doubt, and Moses was no different. He hesitated, questioned, and even argued with God about his limitations. How could he, a man with communication difficulties and little leadership experience, free an entire nation from the most powerful empire of the time? He felt small, incapable, and unfit for this mission. He tried to justify his weaknesses, perhaps even hoping that God would choose someone else. However, God encouraged him, promising that he would be with him and that he would not be alone on this journey. This initial resistance is a common experience for those faced with a great calling. It is natural to feel fear, insecurity, and even deep resistance when confronted with such a challenge. Often, we search for reasons to delay or avoid that commitment because it pulls us out of our comfort zone and challenges us to be much more than we believe ourselves to be. This resistance is a test of faith because, in the end, the call depends not only on our abilities but on our willingness to trust. Moses, though fearful, decided to trust and with courage accepted the call, beginning a journey filled with trials, challenges, and moments of profound transformation. He took on the role of leader and liberator, leading his people through a journey that would last 40 years. This long period in the desert is a powerful spiritual symbol for all who feel called, as it is a place of testing where every step requires faith, perseverance, and strength. The desert, where Moses led his people, reflects the personal journeys of many who face spiritual deserts, going through moments of doubt, exhaustion, and fear. It is a place where weaknesses and limitations are revealed, where we learn to trust in something much greater than ourselves. Moses faced great challenges, including the resistance of his own people, who, in moments of despair, questioned his leadership and even longed to return to Egypt, even if it meant going back to slavery. Imagine Moses' frustration and pain when he saw those he had freed now doubting his ability to lead them. He persisted, guiding them even when their faith wavered, and this is an important lesson for all who are chosen. Often, following the call involves dealing with misunderstandings, resistance, and even opposition from those around us. Being a guide means facing the challenges of the path and also the challenges of leading and inspiring others, which requires patience, empathy, and the ability to see beyond criticisms and doubts. However, Moses' mission did not depend on the approval of others. It came from God, and he knew he had to trust that purpose even when circumstances seemed unfavorable. Moses did not give up because his faith was greater than the obstacles. For the chosen ones, this is a fundamental truth. When the call is authentic, the strength to continue comes from a greater source, which sustains us even in the most difficult moments. The journey in the desert was also a time of learning and transformation for Moses, who learned to lead, to listen to God's voice in every decision, and to become the guide his people needed. The desert shaped and prepared the Hebrew people for something greater, developing in each person the faith and endurance necessary to enter the promised land. Just like Moses, many of us face these deserts in our life journey, periods in which we learn to trust, listen, and become stronger people. The desert is where our character is shaped and our faith refined, preparing us for the greater purposes that God has for us. Moses led his people to the borders of the promised land, and although he himself did not enter, he fulfilled his mission as guide, liberator, and chosen leader. The final lesson for the chosen ones is that fulfilling the call does not mean achieving all personal aspirations but completing the greater purpose. Moses' story shows us that his journey is more than just a biblical narrative. It is a metaphor for the walk of anyone who feels the call to something greater.